So that's the first part I wanted to kind of cover and talk about this morning. Was really about building products, and I think it's probably a good time to stop and have a little. We'll have a break in a few minutes, but right now have a little bit of Q&A discussion, and see. Let's kind of have a little gut check here and see. Does this resonate with you? Do you have different things in your organization that I'm not already touching on? We will get into Lean UX and how it works and how we've implemented it, how it ties into Agile and how you can bring those things together, choose to use it or not. We'll talk about, technologies and stuff this afternoon. But from what we've talked about so far, what's got you? Yes, back.
I don't suppose you got something in the slides talking about just simple pen and paper sketching. You're talking about, doing development and prototyping and focusing on experience. I'm hearing a lot of, oh, we'll just do it in HTML and do it, and then you get the temptation of taking that and actually putting it in something, and you have this artifact and you want to keep it. And you can't do that with pen and paper.
That's right. That's right.
And then you also have the affordance of pen and paper, but it looks like a sketch to be able to actually say, oh, this thing isn't done. I like this thing, need that color.
That's right. In fact, we'll talk about prototyping, and we'll talk about the phase at which HTML prototyping, seems to make the most sense. Although there's no
I just keep seeing such we got to do this that way, and I after having experience with doing pen and paper prototyping, I'm just like, this is much. Just because you can actually get good criticism off of it.
Yeah, and we actually have and I'll talk about it this afternoon. I won't steal my thunder yet, but there's a little trick we're doing with our prototyping that sort of blends the two together. But that's a really good point, because the fidelity of the prototyping makes a big difference, and also people's understanding of what the purpose of that is, and whether you're actually trying to prototype to learn, or you're actually starting the early phases of the building the product by mocking it and fleshing it out as you go. And they're kind of they can be very similar exercises. They even can use some of the same technology, and you could even leverage them, but sometimes you don't want to. And I've found that in the early concept phase it's best to just sketch. I've used cartooning. I've used a thing like a friend of mine, Kevin Chang, has a series of workshops on. I used to do it anyway, on understanding concepts through comics. And you show this to users and you say, is this, does this resonate with how you actually operate? Kind of like I'm asking you right now, how do you operate? Because you can't, unless you get that feedback, you don't really know. And sketching is a really good way to do that. I used to actually use, at one point many years ago, I got magnetic sheets, these, and actually toasted a copier one time, because I was running it through the copier and it melted into the copier, which was great. But I was printing onto it, the various UI elements and then cutting them out, and we could just position them on a magnetic board. It kind of was a quick way to do rapid sketching, because ideation is very, very important, and you don't want. The biggest trick is don't do anything that in the ideation phase that gets you in the way of the ideation. And the problem is, the more technology you introduce, the more likely you get in the way of ideation. In fact, we have these smart boards now. Have you seen the smart boards? They're just like whiteboards on rollers. They're like $8,000 or $10,000 each. We have 10 of them, I think, in different places around the world. And you can go in and sketch and have the video systems tied into it, and you can sketch and you can talk and all that. And I was asking the team, this team I'll talk about a little bit later, that's been doing it in a very, 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 very low-tech way, and now they got them a smart board, and they're like, nah, we don't use it. It's like, it gets in the way. It's, we futz with it all the time, and maybe it's just because the technology's not there, right? Cool, good comment. Yep.
At Netflix, how did you do usability testing, or how did that fit into your process?
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I first got there in 2007, they didn't do really what I would call usability testing. They did more market research. The person running the usability testing was more of a market research person. And there's a difference between market research and design research. They tend to be a little more focus group, driven and those sort of things. Whereas, we had a real nice usability lab. At Netflix, all the conference rooms are named after movies. So the room with the one-way glass was called the Matrix. That was our testing, our usability testing room. But what happened was, so when I got there, they were so strong on A/B testing, right? And we only had the website, and we only had DVDs. We just started doing a little bit with streaming, right? And so it was all about being the downhill skier, doing the fine tuning, you know, shaving off microseconds, right? But in came TV and streaming. And all of a sudden we're like, well, we don't know how to do these. So we had to start prototyping, and we had to start doing more usability, you know, and design research. So the person left who was running that before, and then a new person came in who had much more of that ethos. And then finally we brought a really strong design leader in, Rochelle King, who's now actually the head of design for Spotify. She just left about a month or two ago to move there to be head of Spotify, and she did a really great job. So we did a combination of prototyping and usability studies. And what we tend to do is I remember one concept we had around it's just something as stupid as the button. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we agitate over the silly button. You know, the add a queue or the, you know, because for a while we had this split thing where you could add a queue or you could add to your DVD, and, you know, trying to figure out the right way to do this stupid multi-function button. And so Kim on my team, we met together, we discussed the problems, you know, product manager, design, and engineering. And she went off and did like 100 prototypes, you know, just using jQuery. Some of those were ones we said, others were things she thought up, every variation you could imagine. We spent some time looking at them. We culled it down to some smaller set that we thought tested several hypotheses, you know, like simple to more, you know, give you more control, you know, there's kind of different areas on that spectrum. And we took those 4 or 5 into usability testing, or 6 or 7, whatever it was. And over a few days of usability testing, there were a couple of, you know, kind of apparent clear winners. And then we took those with a few others we thought, you know, probably might be a good thing to test too. And we put those in A/B testing. And then from A/B testing, we got some good read on which ones were doing better. And then we took those and prototyped some more, went back to usability testing, and then did more A/B testing, and finally arrived at, you know, so, and then of course things changed over time, and we started doing more just streaming, and, you know, the whole button thing went away. Does that answer your question?
How often
How
did
often?
you do that?
It got to be much more frequent at the end, where we were doing, there was probably every week or two something going on. Now at PayPal, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, for all the projects that I'm doing that are lean, we go to weekly usability testing, and I'll get into that, which I think is really, really important. We have a really rapid pace. We turn around whole experiences in a week, you know, kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you could comment on, it seemed like a while back there was this push on ISO 9000 kind of process and documentation, and even in software coding, that modules should all be organized a certain way. And
Right.
I have a sense now more at this other extreme that it's just get it out, see if it works.
That's a good point.
So I think they were both valid at different times.
Yeah.
So what changes to
Yeah.
make them both
Yeah.
right and wrong?
So a lot of the push around the documentation, you know, when things are more stable, you have more time, and when your release cycles are longer, you know, especially if you're in enterprise software, or you're in ship software, you know, I used to lead teams. We had our stuff shipped on CD, right? And so when you got a CD cycle, you got to imprint it, you got to, you know, release it, you got to ship it, and then those cycles kind of create a more of a need for, you know, and then you have the user manuals and the documentation. So all that stuff kind of goes together. Then all of a sudden you get this web world where everything's changing all the time, and you just really literally, and if you get in the A/B testing world where you're testing all these variations, your documentation has a really hard time of keeping up with it. And I don't really have a good answer for how to solve this yet, but I do know that predictive documentation is a problem, but explanatory documentation that describes processes, business cases, you know, user studies, user information is very valuable. So I think it's what kind of documentation you do. It's when you try to predict what the experience is going to be and put all this documentation in that. Now when you get into software documentation itself, right, you know, we went through the whole phases like I'll do it all in UML, and we'll generate the code, or, you know, there's been all these different things, right? If your pace of change is really rapid, you just can't keep up with it, right? I mean, somebody else is going to be out there that's smaller and more nimble, who's not going to follow those processes. They're going to cheat, if you will, right? They're going to get it to the market first. They're going to beat you. So I think all these pressures have moved us away from that, right? At the same time, you made a really good point that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you have to have something that lives through the organization as new people come on and everything else, but it just has to be as lightweight as possible. We'll talk about 3 principles I talk about in Lean UX, and one of those covers that, and the meat of that topic is really around the balance between documentation and other ways to, implicit ways to kind of collect that lore, that living knowledge that is in the organization. But you may be specifically talking more about the software documentation itself of the actual structure
Well,
itself.
I meant just in general, why.
Yeah.
why
Does that make
workplace-
sense? Does that answer kind of, yeah?
I think you're pointed at the web. Well, I disagree with
The velocity of the web, yeah.
The fact that the web is instantaneous doesn't make, it's okay to have I guess this is another question, a bug in it, because you can change it tomorrow.
That's right.
And therefore.
That's right. You look at Facebook, now they backed off this some, but they've gotten to a continuous delivery model where every, a couple few hours their code's going out live. We're going to be moving to some similar things. We're going from you code freeze, and it's 6 or 8 weeks later your code actually goes live on the site after a lot of QA process and stuff. And even if it was one word change, you had to go through the same process, and you had to sit on a call that was 8 hours long where everybody who had stuff queued up to go out had to explain what they were doing, what they were putting out. And we're changing all those processes, but it's obscene stuff possible. But yeah, so. Break time, yeah? Or?
Well, actually, I had a question now. How do you deal with the fear involved with changing something that's existing? You talk about security, you talk about dealing with money, execs or stakeholders or whatever you call them, have a certain amount of fear involved.
Yeah.
And you're talking about live Q&A, live A/B testing, and like how do you deal with the fear of pissing off users or losing people's money or whatever,
Yeah, especially that way. PayPal is a really interesting case study on this because, we really are protecting people from very, very bad people out there. There's some really crazy stuff that goes on, and I think, I'm trying to remember the number now, but I want to say it was something like, we do 1,000 takedowns a day. People put up phishing sites around PayPal. There's 1,000 a day worldwide. So. And we have to be very careful. Like we just reinvented our checkout experience, and can't show it to you yet. I wish I could, but we reinvented it. And one of the aspects of it is it's all on an iframe and a light box, right? And there are all kinds of phishing concerns and other things that come up. And the way we address that, and I'll talk about this more later, is that the info security team. So the way PayPal has worked in the past is somebody would come up with an idea, and then they have to go before legal, risk, info security, all these different teams, and central architecture, you name it, all the police states, right? And you go before them, and what's their posture going to be? No, exactly. I mean, if you're in a room of people who are really smart, and somebody's presenting an IT to you, and what's your value going to be? You're going to say, well, here's where I see a problem with this, right? It's going to always be that posture. So we changed the conversation. We got them involved up front. Like, for example, with our reinvented checkout experience, we actually have the InfoSec team. I got the team because they're really some smart folks, and some folks actually used to be in what we call the Yahoo Paranoids. At Yahoo, we call them the Paranoids. That was their actual real name, team name. And you could become a paranoid too in your team. They would teach you how to be a paranoid, security conscious. So we got them. I said, hey, you guys, here's Jeff on my team, the guy that's stolen it to Netflix and brought back right. I said, Jeff will get with you. He'll try to do this. You try to defeat it. You go back and forth, and then let's try to arrive at something that balances all this. But the goal is we want to create the best experience possible. And once they got on the table with creating the best experience possible, we got to a solution pretty quick that's amenable to all parties. Because we respected them, they respected us, You know, same thing with risk. When we started the project, we've got a few elements in our checkout flow that are totally crazy from a risk perspective. You know, from what PayPal's done in the past. I don't think they're crazy now, but when I first heard it, I went, what? I can't believe we're doing this. But our head of risk, an awesome guy, Tom Keithley, sat at the table with the handful of us and said, I'm fully in on this. We're going to create the best experience possible. We're not going to start with risk. We're going to start with our customers. And we're going to make sure, though, that we don't, you know, sell the farm. We don't shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't screw our customers, and we don't, you know, we don't do things that are stupid. So that was the way we solved that. Now the other secret that's going on at PayPal is we have whole new DNA at the top. So the president, David Marcus, was part of our Zong acquisition last year, which was a small startup. The largest company he's led before is 150 people, and he has a startup mindset, and is totally, you know, absolutely manic on the great design, and had a product. We used to have 9 product organizations. Now we have 1. They had a product was also in Zong, the mobile payments company we acquired. So the guys we acquired, the small startup, now are the head of the company, right? So the DNA changed too, and it is kind of hard to change this without the DNA change at the top. Although I was moving down this line without them in place. I had Scott Thompson in the video, maybe. I guess it doesn't matter, but you know, Scott had a different DNA, and he did a great job for PayPal at the time, because when Scott came in a few years ago, Scott was faced with a problem. He came as CTO. He was faced with a problem that PayPal was totally unstable. We had 80% availability, sometimes 90% availability. It had some bad risk models and stuff like that. So he clamped down on everything and got the ship righted, you know, from a technology availability, risk, release management, all that stuff was really put in place to ensure stability and financial security. Came from Visa and had a lot of, brought, you know, people in from Visa. The problem is that wasn't the complete picture, and in the eco space of Silicon Valley, there's a new mobile payment startup every week or two on TechCrunch, right? And so that is also a driver, is the competitive pressure. You can't stay stable and survive. So I think those different factors.
Yeah, because I've been in cultures that are engineering heavy cultures. It's all about stability in the roadmap and managing things really tightly.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of times as a consultant, I'll go in and try to support UX and changing the culture from a UX perspective.
It's hard.
And I've actually been like banned from a whole corporation because I got in too deep. I had access to everything in this entire, the only person who they gave outside access to everything, and I was supporting the UX culture and really building a whole lot of UX prototypes and really, helping them change the direction of the product, and and that's just, that wars against that engineering culture of stability and
Right.
all those
Right.
kinds of things.
Did you have a good partnership with the engineering team, or was it mostly the design team?
Well, I was hired to support UX.
Right.
So I was direct report to the lead UX.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And and they were just trying to birth, a design UX culture,
Yeah.
sort of from a VP level, but it was warring against the existing culture, and I guess,
There's many cases where it just can't be fixed. It's sad. Some organizations just have antibodies to doing the right thing. And what I've seen though is that if you can, in all the various places I've been that have been successful at changing things, I usually find allies. I'm always on the lookout for allies. So one of the reasons I do all those interviews when I come into a company is I want to find people who are like-minded. And I want to see if there's a way to make them successful. So if I can get in with a product manager, for example, that has, frustration, maybe it's because engineering or maybe it's design or whatever, and I can get in there and fix that problem for them and help them think through their product, that person, if that person's got the power in the organization, to change things, they become your ally, and they change things. As a consultant, it's hard because you're not brought in the same way, right?
In this case, I had like the product and VP, like some of the VPs and the product and the UX engineering and the UX design lead all kind of on my side, but it was the CTO that kind of laid the
Oh wow.
you know, the CTO that laid the trump card, that was one of the first employees on a huge organization.
Right.
You know, the CTO was the one that laid the trump card.
Yep.
But yet I had like, you know, the VP's product manager, UX. You know, so I mean, maybe as an employee that situation.
Yeah, it would have been tough as an employee too, right? You know,
Yeah.
And the only way generally the
I
only way.
probably would have been fired as a
Yeah, exactly. Or you would have left. I mean, generally what I've said, you know, this sounds a little harsh, but I'll say, you know, if you're doing the right things, and you're doing it in the right way, you know, and at some point, the company just will not respond to that or reward that, then you're probably in the wrong place, you know, and you find somewhere else to go. I mean, I know that sounds harsh, but you know, it just
that company just kind of got acquired and became obsolete.
Yeah.
You know, over
not
time.
surprising, right?
Right, not surprising, but
Exactly.
but there was a movement trying to rebirth the company, almost like you're doing at
Yeah.
PayPal and others. So I really commend.
Well, I feel fortunate in that it's a serendipity, you know, because some good things have just happened.
Yeah.
And we haven't written the chapter yet, you know, we're just getting there, and then the tale's not told until we get these experiences out and they're actually good. You know, we believe they are. We're getting good feedback from customers, but, you know, never underestimate consumers. Yeah.
How do you, or what advice would you give to someone just looking to get into A/B testing to fight against the kind of thought of, oh, it's good enough?
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you find the balance between the cost of A/B testing and actually realizing financial gains, you know, for the business-minded folk?
So if you have no one in product who actually understands consumer science, A/B testing, it's going to be tricky, right? Just to be honest. But I mean, there are things you can do. You can, you know, there's a lot of technology, you know, Optimizely and Google Analytics or Google Test, whatever it's called, that are out there that, you know, you could easily, from an engineering side, put into the product, and you could, you know, show someone in product how easy this is to do. If you're willing to burn some extra cycles on weekends or whatever to kind of fund getting it going, right? You could say, hey, look, you know what, we can do this real easily. I can add another variation of this, you know, and then, you know, and here's how you'll get the data back. It's really a rare person, like a product manager or whatever, that if you partner with them and suggest that sort of thing, you're giving them something for free that makes them look smarter, that makes them be more successful potentially, that they won't gravitate to it. I mean, I don't find too often. So my secret's always been just, it's, so our president, I'll use a little expletive here, pardon if the company's sensitive to this sort of thing, but our executive used the term, David, our president, GSD, which is get shit done, right? So you really, unless you get something in place that people can see and understand that they've never experienced before, you can talk about it all day long, but if you actually get it in place, then you're at a different conversation point. You may not be successful, but you're going to be a lot more likely to get it successful. You know.
So in the case of on Netflix, you were saying changing the way users scroll. I mean, did someone just say, hey, I wonder if there might be an improvement to be found here, or did you have some sort of testing up front that revealed that users were having issues with the way the interface currently was?
Well, because we were totally changing the way that we're representing content, we actually didn't know how to best scroll it. So it was kind of a different problem, right? But the question I could answer it in other ways, in that we had many cases where we'd have, you know, a product and kind of design review meetings where we get together and we talk about some different thoughts on things we were seeing. You know, for example, we wanted to get, better engagement on people watching movies, consuming movies, actually. So we thought about things like, snacking, where you'd show little in-place videos at the most interesting moments and stuff like that. But other things, were like, how do you discover these movies, right? So we had lots of ideas on, making discovery easy, and we had hack days internally. And so sometimes we'd take a hack day and we'd say, okay, we had one More to Love kind of concept where it sort of fanned out and showed you from this movie, like the Kevin Bacon sort of thing, what's most closer. If you like this, you'd probably like this, and you sort of navigate through, right? And it was awesome. It was one of the winners of Hack Day, right? So that engineer got to build that experience for the site, right, for one of the A/B tests, and a lot of variations on that. But we had situations where we'd be in a meeting and an engineer would say, well, have we ever tried blah, blah, blah? And our product manager, head of product, Todd Yellen would say, that's a great idea, let's make a sale for it, And engineer he signed up for extra work, or she signed up for extra work to add that extra sale, it's fine. It just got put in there. So there was a democracy about, it didn't really matter where the ideas came from. The CEO would have an idea and say, well, I think if we just did, this one case, I think it's something as simple as just an island, just put a bunch of links out there, and we're all like, that's crazy. But, we tested it. We put it as a test cell. We had others. It didn't win, but other times, Reed was completely right in his ideas that we thought were dumb. But we all were humbled by the data. If you ever get your culture to that humbled by data, humbled by the customer, then most of your battles are kind of won, in my mind anyway.